All right, guys, welcome once again to Marsego Empire. Welcome. Today we're going to have a very interesting discussion on an aspect of our lives, on the programs that we need to study to be able to work with one of the biggest organizations in the world. And that organization is United Nations, which is called the UN. Now, we all know based on history that in 1939, there was an invasion in one of the countries where two other countries actually declared war on another, and that war actually lasted for 6 good years. That war actually caused a lot of people to lose their lives. Properties were actually destroyed, and there was security unrest, or there was security issues all over the world. So in 1945, 50 countries, which are called member states, actually came together to form a body, and that body was actually called the United Nations. The United Nations, as at that time, was formed primarily to, one, maintain international peace and security, and to enhance cooperation amongst member states across the world on economics, social, and humanitarian problems. So, as at the time they were actually forming the UN, these were their main objectives. But as of today, there are 153 member states of the United Nations. And actually, the United Nations, as of today, works on maintaining international peace and security, protecting human rights, delivering humanitarian aid, promoting sustainable development, and upholding international laws. So the UN actually works on this. Now, since the inception of the United Nations and its rapid increase in its member states, the UN has actually covered the entire world, providing jobs or employment opportunities to people who already prepared themselves, or people who have actually studied certain courses that gives them the opportunity to be able to apply and work with the UN. And if you may know, the UN actually has some good employment opportunities. They have some good wages that they are able to maybe give, or they are able to have some good employment conditions for its employees. So a lot of people, based on data, actually have the desire to be able to work with the UN. Now, if you know, in 2012, the UN actually came out with the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, the Sustainable Development Goals actually has certain thematic areas that they want to work with. And one of the key areas, or let me just talk, two of the key areas of the Sustainable Development Goals is, one, promoting access and quality education to people. And this actually focuses much on Africa. Number two, eradicating poverty. This actually focuses on Africa. And you know, among all the continents we have in the world, the continent of Africa is the poorest. And they are also trying to promote the delivery of quality healthcare. And most of these actually focuses on Africa and maybe some other countries. Now, since the inception of this, there are a lot of people who have been able to have access to opportunities and working with UN, moving from one country to another. And today, those who actually work with UN, you realize that they are either being maybe moved or being transferred from one country to another, providing certain important solutions to emerging problems in these countries. You know, there is a lot of this insecurity, instability in most countries. You know, in Africa, there are so many countries that we have this instability in this. We have Sudan, we have the Mali, we have the Burkina Faso, we have the Cameroon, we have the Gabon in our current dispensation. And UN keep providing support to these countries. And you realize that there are most of our brothers and sisters, there are uncles who work with the UN that are actually sent to these countries on UN peace mission. Now, so it is very important that as we have the discussion on international education, we should be mindful of the courses that we study, especially if you are somebody who aspires to work with the UN maybe in the future. Now, to those who may want to take the opportunity to study at the international level, studying at the international level actually goes beyond just acquiring knowledge. One of the key areas that we must pay attention to, especially for people who want to study at the international level and possibly land some good jobs, you need to be careful about the courses that you choose, because at the end of graduation, you should be able to have the skills that will help you to provide solution to problems. Because if there are emerging problems on peace, emerging problems on security, emerging problems on human rights, emerging economic and political problems in most countries in the world, and you are somebody who aspires to work with the UN, then you should be able to have the skills, you should be able to have the expertise to be able to find solution to some of these problems. Now, if you are somebody who also aspires to work with the UN, then you should be somebody who will be able to weigh views and be able to discern on wrongs and good. You should be able to substantiate what opinions, what suggestions are good and what suggestions are also bad. Now, we should also be mindful of some of the requirements that are expected of us if you want to work with any organizations in the world. The requirements that are expected of a particular organization, you should be able to work towards it. For example, if you're somebody who wants to work with the UN, one, you should have a good command of English language, French, Spanish, Arabic, Chinese, and Russian. These are the 6 top languages that you should have a proficiency in. So you are somebody who wants to work with UN, you should be able to begin preparing yourself. You should be able to start acquiring the skills, start learning how to speak these languages. For example, you are somebody who wants to be the UN Secretary General. You should be able to be fluent and in the 6 languages that I have mentioned. So it is very important that we keep preparing ourselves to be able to meet the requirements. Now, you realize that the UN has certain areas that it works with. So it is also very important that to those who would like to work with the UN, the choice of programs is very key. Even though there are so many job vacancies, there are so many areas of careers that the UN normally employ people to fill. But the top courses, the top programs that a lot of people would like to study to be able to have access to positions, have access to employment in UN should be key. Now, let's look at some of these programs that we need to pay attention to. One of the programs that I want to talk about is development studies. Development studies is actually a program that is studied at the master's level, at the graduate level. And some of the major areas, the major courses that people can study can be development economics. In these development studies, it also talks about political policy, the policies that countries should be able to adopt to ensure that there is economic improvement in the lives of the people. Then courses that people can also consider is political science and the development studies. It talks about this in political policy, the policies that political parties should be able to adopt to ensure that there are development in their countries. Now, another course that people who aspire to work with the UN should consider is human rights, because human rights issues is one of the biggest issues in our world. Because when there is insecurity, if there is a war in a particular country, you realize that human rights abuse is on the rise. So they always employ, would like to recruit people who have special skills in what? Human rights. Now, another important causes that we should be able to consider is international relations, ensuring the peace between 2 countries, 3 countries. That's multilateral relationship between countries. Now, another important course that people would like to study could be international law or law in general, but the key emphasis here is what? International law. Don't forget, we also have a human rights law. So people who also have a background in human rights law also have a higher chance of working with the UN. Now, another important course that people who aspire to work with the UN should consider is communication. Another one is also journalism. So communication and journalism may have some form of relationship there. Now, another course that is of serious interest to the UN is also public administration or public policy, because the UN deals with a whole lot of policy. I've just spoken about one of the policies that was introduced, I think, in 2012 in one of their conferences, the Sustainable Development Goals. Before that particular policy was introduced, there were their expertise that sat to be able to put those views on paper and make it a big program. It became a policy, and all countries are working towards it. If you know, in Ghana, I don't know if they still do, even though they do this, but it has the rate of doing it, then the maybe funds that are really invested in this has really come down. You realize that if you are in Ghana, during the era of Professor John Evans Atamels, that was around from 2009 to 2012, you realize that school pupils are being provided with sandals, school uniforms, and all those things. Even though they still do it now, but I think the impact is very low. Yes. So when the Sustainable Development Goals were introduced, those days it was actually called the Millennium Development Goals. You see, so the UN have been supporting countries to ensure that some of these basic needs are provided to each citizens, to ensure that kids are able to go to school. You understand? So that is one thing. Now, another important area that people should be taking so serious is environment and climate change. Now, the UN is actually focusing so much attention on the environment. If you are in Ghana, you realize that there are so many things that is happening to our environment. The mining is destroying so many things, deforestation, there is a climate change, the weather is actually scorching so seriously, there is changes in the weather, our seasons are not really responding to things that you used to do in the past just because of climate change. So the UN is really focusing much on these 2 areas to ensure that at least people are able to have a comfortable and peaceful life. Now, another important program that people should consider is environmental policy. Another one is environmental education. Environmental policy and environmental education is also one of the critical areas that the UN would like to employ people who have skills in these areas. Now, the last but not the least course that I would like to draw your attention to is engineering or technology. You realize that somebody works with the UN as an engineer, somebody works with the UN as this. Yes. So the various areas that I have just spoken about, UN places so much emphasis on this, even though this may not be the only areas that the UN would like to work with, but the UN also maybe they find so much interest in people who have expertise in these areas. So if you are somebody who has maybe the vision of working with the UN in the near future, then I would like you to consider some of these courses going forward. I think weeks ago, I made a video saying that if you are somebody who wants to come to Canada, don't just have the desire to come to Canada. You must be able to dream big. Dream big if you want to come to Canada. And in that video, I have spoken about the courses that people should pursue. I can give you a 100% guarantee that you are somebody who wants to come and study in Canada and you have the intention of studying any of these programs. I can tell you that even if you did not stay in Canada, once you complete your program, you are able to complete your postgraduate permit. I can tell you that UN can actually employ you. You move from one country or you move from one member state to another. There are a lot of people that I can give you an instances of that are just moving from one country to another. The condition of work, the condition of service of UN is actually one of the best in the world. You just be moving from one place to another. You move from its one mission to another, one country to another, working with the UN. So guys, that is it. We should be able to prepare ourselves to take up some of these positions very soon, because Charlie, once you have the opportunity to study in any of the advanced countries, the possibility of working with some of these organizations is very high. Once you are able to have the skills or the expertise that is needed, just graduating maybe from a particular university, maybe in international development, masters in international development, may not necessarily give you the opportunity, the chance to work with the UN. You need the skills. So you should be able to prepare yourself in advance. Take up this in how we even call it volunteer works with companies or organizations that have similar objectives with the UN. So once you do that, it means that you are developing your skills. You'll be having the experiences. If you are somebody who has so much interest in humanitarian work, you know, humanitarian work has to do with human rights, supplying materials or giving aid to people. You are somebody who has expertise in health. You have public health. Yes, let me just talk about public health or global health. The UN also places so much interest in health. You see, you can easily work with the UN. So guys, that is what I decided to bring to you this time of the day. Let me see if there is Oscar video. I see you. Awuku Katizo, good work. Hey Katizo, I think I have to call you. Good work done, my uncle. Katizo, I think I have to call you. My uncle, please, I'm watching you live from Tema Committee 25, Dowenya. Thank you, Katizo. Katizo was a good friend. Katizo was actually a good friend back in senior high school, but as he said, I don't want to talk about that. He's my senior brother, so that's it. Katizo, I believe you are fine. Katizo, we are going to talk. I'll do my best to call you. Long time, Chief Honor Binke one. Hey, Luis, I hope you are fine. Hey, Beatrice Anku, my boss. How are you doing? How is my boss doing too? Extend my greetings to my boss. Luis, thank you. Nana Apia Kubi, thank you, my brother. I hope you are fine. Okay. So, guys, that is about the UN. This is just a short video I decided to bring to your attention. Enjoy your day. It's likely I may come back and we'll have some interesting discussion. It's possible I may or I may not come, but if I come your way, so be it. If I don't, to see you tomorrow. Enjoy your evening. Bye bye. Let's see.